All right. Well, happy Friday out there, coming to you every week with another Fireside Friday chat brought to you by the Delaware Entrepreneurial Center at Ohio Wesleyan University. I'm Steve Flaherty, and today we're going to be joined by ecosystem builder, entrepreneur, author now, Ben McDougal. So get ready, get started. We're going to be talking all things entrepreneurship and business today on Fireside Friday. So welcome. All right. So, yeah, thank you. We always enjoy these. And it's a privilege to have a friend, a mentor, a colleague, a number of things joining me today on the show. Mr. Ben McDougal, live from Iowa. Welcome to Fireside Fridays here at the Delaware Entrepreneurial Center.
Yes. Thank you, Steve. What a treat. I'm looking forward to hearing how this has been going. You're interacting with some great conversations. So looking forward to learning more about what you've been pulling out of those. And it's great to be here to give you a little quick update and talk about all things, anything, whatever you want. So it's great to be here, my friend. Thanks again.
Yeah. Well, and like we always like to start out is just give a color. I obviously know you pretty decently well over the last couple years here as we've had interactions. But just to give some color about, who Ben McDougal is, not the full synopsis, but just a little bit of a treat and kind of that origin story, if you will, of, where you've been and, kind of where you're at now.
Yeah. Well, the short story is I have hobbies that pay. So we can move on if you'd like. However, if you'd like a quick visual, I thought it'd be fun because I talk about thinking about your work as a career portfolio, a pie chart of activities that are interacting in different ways and providing different types of capital, whether that's financial or energy or human or network. There's all sorts of interesting ways that you can work on multiple things. And so I thought it just would be fun to use this visual. We'll see if it works. I've heard this is a first time thing. I'm not going to do any sort of slide deck, but this is a slide that I'm preparing for an upcoming talk that's around the book, but focused on just kind of, exploring career nirvana. And so in my introduction, I thought this would be a fun one-page glance at like the state of now. Can you see my screen, Steve?
No, not yet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's see. You might need to pull it into. There we go. All right. On the fly experimentation. Thank you, Wizard of Oz. So this is like a fun way to just look at how I spend my time. As Steve mentioned, he and I get to collaborate all sorts of different ways through this cool nationwide movement from the Kauffman Foundation called 1 Million Cups. I've been a part of that caffeinated conversation for the last 8 or 9 years every Wednesday here in Des Moines, Iowa. But over the last 3 years or so have been able to help support and connect about 50 different 1 Million Cups communities across the 12-state Midwest region as the regional rep. So this was a new position we piloted and built in order to support organizers like Steve and all the folks in Ohio, but also folks in Indiana. I just got off the call with Drew down in Indianapolis, and of course here in Iowa, but also North Dakota and Missouri, all over this 12-state region. And so we can talk more about that in depth here throughout our time together. But imagine the amount of conversations that are happening with so many remarkable people, all accelerating entrepreneurs through this intersection of connection and education. So I'm really thankful for the work. That's a lot of the passionate time I spend. But the thing is, all the things I'm involved with, I care about. I love my work, and I'm really retired because of it. And so the statewide entrepreneurial ecosystem focus as the entrepreneur in residency for Techstars Iowa is an emerging role that I'm leaning into pretty heavily, looking at collecting and connecting dots throughout Iowa. That's been some really neat conversations and work at the economic development level. And so along with those slivers of the pie chart, you've got my own companies over on the other side there with Flight Bright. We could talk about this too, but it's an electronic beer flight paddle. So it has a color touch screen in it, shows each beer as they arrive, and you can learn about each one on the touch screen and share it throughout social media. Open is an open house scheduler that connects realtors to home builders for the ongoing interaction of scheduling open houses. And then the oldest company is actually a video game industry company. So we host video game events around North America, launched a social network back when MySpace was cool. And so that's been a really neat piece, a smaller sliver of the career portfolio. And then the new book, You Don't Need This Book, is a project that I'm really thankful about. We can talk more about it as well. So that's a quick rundown of the state of now, pal. I'll stop sharing my screen here, and we can, or you can probably control what we see.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Nice.
Magic buttons.
Yes. So, that's. I also have another company. I first built a 3v3 soccer tournament. I have a computer science degree. I worked in web development for 8 years before retiring and going in-house at a home builder for another 8 years as an entrepreneur kind of marketing type of role. But along the side of it was always this extra energy for entrepreneurial activity. And so we talk a lot about like side hustles and entrepreneurship connected to entrepreneurship. Whew. You asked for an origin story, and I gave you a little more. I guess we can finish the show here. We've wrapped up lunch in 7 minutes. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, a lot of this. I mean, so you mentioned the book. So I got the book here. So yeah, lucky enough to get the signed by author edition.
Oh, so that hologram's hot, eh? That's got a nice pop on it.
Yeah. So, but I mean, in the book, I mean, you talk a lot about this, and I mean, you're one of those individuals, that had your own companies, and had that both entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship, as they say. But you've taken it beyond and gone into this what we call ecosystem building, right? And it's a term that people use, kind of throw it around a lot, but I mean, it's connecting in there and having the different networks or whatever all throughout. But like you mentioned, with Techstars, Iowa, I mean, you've been thrust over into that arena through the connections that you made along the way. And so just kind of, we think of entrepreneurs themselves as social people. A lot of entrepreneurs will sometimes claims, that they're introverts, right? But they all kind of know the importance of networking and getting the face out there and having that village, that support system and whatnot. But what you've done with ecosystem building is a little bit, beyond just your basic networking and showing up at the different social events and, taking that leadership role in the community and everything. And just kind of like to get your opinion on that journey, because it's not something I think that you see, 10 years ago. Like if they told you that you'd be, entrepreneur residence, doing Techstars Iowa and everything, you'd probably say, get out of here. Like I don't even,
what is that? Right? The
know what it is, right?
Didn't exist. The term wasn't there. Startup wasn't even a word when I went through school, right? You were still going and getting a piece of paper to build someone else's dream. And I think the mindset of entrepreneurs and fueling that, no matter how an individual decides to explore it, has definitely evolved in our education systems as well as just kind of in the workforce. So I appreciate you asking about that, Steve. I'd be happy to kind of riff on that a little bit. It honestly started, like you said, as an entrepreneur. I was participating in the community. This is a lonely roller coaster. Chapter 2 is called Community in this book. It's such an important piece to be around others, whether that's learning from other founders or sharing your story and practicing how the narrative of that comes together. and just simply accelerating others. I'll say it every time. It's an unmatched energy. And so being in a community is like the tribal sense of entrepreneurship that's super healthy and actually very important. And so as an entrepreneur, I was participating in the community activities. I was attending 1 Million Cups. I was presenting. I was at the networking events. I was sharing, the web development work, but also my own companies and learning how to build those through these allies throughout the community. And so the opportunity to lead, I think, will emerge if you find tribes that are a good fit. If you care about folks beyond the business card exchange, you'll be able to find another gear that unlocks some time to commit into providing that space, making those connections, having something that provides a place for people to gather. And so when I was asked to help organize 1 Million Cups way back when, these were friends. I was already enjoying every Wednesday. This was a thing I liked. And it just made sense for me to apply some multimedia marketing to align a brand, to help continue to showcase what 1MC, 1 Million Cups was for Des Moines. And so I would live in that role for quite some time. I was a volunteer organizer for 5 years. I think a lot of people, whether it's entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, students, they start in this entrepreneurship, this volunteer type role. But honestly, it's not really volunteerism, friends. It's actually a gift. And what can happen is the opportunities to help continue to accelerate the folks that you care about. And so I volunteered as the 1MC organizer for about 5 years, saw what 1 Million Cups was becoming around the country through the Kauffman Foundation. There's annual gatherings of different organizers from all around the country. And I just blown up. I was like, whoa, we can do something with this in Des Moines. I came back on fire. As the movement grew, the Kauffman Foundation realized they needed some more support for existing communities. And so the regional rep role was piloted by me and a handful of others who just kind of raised their hand and said, 1MC I love 1MC. This is something I really enjoy. And I think I can help make a positive impact for other organizers. And so through that role, I mean, imagine 50 different communities across 12 states, all different types of environments and ecosystems, all different types of people that were, whether it was the chamber director or the person in the educational organization or the networking, the co-working space, the investor, the entrepreneurs, all the different players, the actors throughout an ecosystem, where these interactions were becoming like very commonplace. And so this is a book that kind of started it for me, I feel like, with Seth Godin being one of my favorite thinkers. Tribes is almost like the guide of 1 Million Cups organizer without any 1MC tactics. So I love giving tribes away. And as I continued to explore the work as the regional rep, inside the Kauffman Foundation, they're building policy work. It's a big nonprofit that focuses on education. 1 Million Cups is kind of like the experiment that escaped the lab, but then they've really been leaning into the emerging field of entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And so naturally, you're having these conversations in these different environments. You're educating yourself through all the conversation with like global thought leaders through the Kauffman Foundation and people involved in this work as a professional field. And you almost like return back. And now I'm focused, of course, continuing to build around the country and in the Midwest, but working with economic development type mindsets to let's see what we can do with this concept throughout the entire state of Iowa. So another more quick book recommendations. The Rainforest, Victor Wang and Greg Horowitz. This is one of the first times where you see the word ecosystem connected to entrepreneurship. And so a really early book on this. Most recent one that I like to have folks take a peek at is The Startup Community Way. Brad Feld and Ian Hathaway look at complex adaptive systems and systems thinking in order to help identify an ecosystem so that you can collect and connect those dots in a bottom-up, very positive sum approach, all centered around entrepreneurship. And so that's another long-winded answer, my friend. But it's everything kind of culminating towards being an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder in a professional type of role, while still weaving it into those other areas of an overall career portfolio.
Yeah, well, and so the books that you show, I mean, so some big players, some big hitters there, right? Seth Godin, Brad Feld, Victor Wang, all of which you got involved with your own book, which, I mean, that just shows, what the power of the ecosystem. I mean, to Brad Feld, founder of Techstars, venture capitalist, able, to get a quote on the back of a book by Seth Godin, I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's dreams coming true, right? That's, an idol, a person that inspires you. Then to, I mean, I can't, imagine the feeling of that, seeing that come in the first time and seeing it in print, I'm sure is, ecstatic, right?
Yeah. The print is cool, but honestly, the process was plain, rocking out in the garage with your favorite rock stars, right?
Yeah.
It was surreal. It would probably be a fair word for it. But once you started working with them, and like Victor, he was one of the guiding lights to turn that page and write the book. And Seth Godin has been my favorite thought leader for so long. He almost taught me how to enjoy audiobooks and reading again, let alone all the wisdom he shares in so many of his books. And so they all have individual stories where the connection point, we could talk for another half hour on the interactions with some of these folks. But I that said, these guys are remarkable, of course. But honestly, along with my own experiences, which have been interesting and have taught me a lot about entrepreneurship, it is the stories of thousands of entrepreneurs that is the true inspiration that started to weigh so heavily on my back. I had to get this out, if for no other reason, to synthesize it, to pass along to my little startup that pays in love. That was my why. I was starting to worry I was going to regret not passing this experiential kind of shared wisdom from our connected era into a very focused, here's everything I know about entrepreneurship with that strong connected era vibe.
Yeah. No. Well, and I mean, that's I guess when you take a position in, quote, the ecosystem, where you are, I mean, you're rubbing elbows with the people that go off and, build multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar, companies, the community leaders, the, academia, institutional, leaders, right? And you're seeing it blend. And I think you probably look at stuff the same way I do, where it's just, you see just connections firing. And it's there's so many collaborations and intersections and those Venn diagrams merging, right? That can come together. And then you hear those stories, and then you can help, connect people, but hearing all that inspiration, it does. I mean, it's just, you become talking about it yourself. You become doing, and being those things. Well, I mean, we've said all the time, right? You become the average of your, 5, 7, pick a number, whatever, closest, peers. And you truly do. And so the putting yourself at that point where you can absorb all that information, is something that I think that's probably had a big influence on your own successes, your own, careers and ventures, right?
Yeah. The personal enrichment that comes from accelerating others, it's just like a natural awareness that occurs. And you can translate that into whatever you want. It's kind of a funny joke, but 1 million cup, that's just an example of volunteerism and leaning into something in order to accelerate others. And just organically, by hearing how someone else is building their business and maybe asking a question, getting involved, watching them, how it evolves, and, having them return every week or come back and present 6 months, 2 years later, that compiles. There are all these little stones that build towards this wall of understanding. And everyone has a story to tell, right? And everyone has a perspective, an interesting situation that you can learn from, whether it's good or bad. And so being open-minded, loving inclusivity because it like is more flexible, interesting, and long-term sustainability stuff. Those type of things can really impact whatever your career portfolio looks like. And I think in the end, I've been enjoying some other readings from Naval Ravikant. He talks about retirement in kind of a fun way. So I'll finish this riff with a more philosophical element. Like, you can retire in 3 ways. You can save enough money in order to cover your existing burn rate. You can reduce your burn rate down towards 0, maybe become a monk, and now you've retired. Or you can find something that you truly love to do. It's hard to compete with being you. And if you enjoy the time you spend, if there's peace in doing something that feels like play to you, but looks like work to others, you have also achieved career nirvana and in your own way already started the enjoyment of retirement. So knowing that I've gotten to that state of mind, it's not a permanent thing, right? Things will always change. I hope to always feel this way. But knowing how I've kind of navigated the fog towards this for myself and seeing how entrepreneurship, seeing how community building work some of the key formulas in order for my journey to take that path, it feels like that's one of the motivating factors and why I get so excited, so passionate for people who are exploring their entrepreneurial spirit, no matter what that looks like. The small business owner, the innovator inside an existing company, creating a ruckus and keeping that company ahead of the innovation curve. The entrepreneur who explores the side hustle at first, but then goes all in. Or the person who's raising capital and doing things that are hard to even imagine. There's so many different versions of it. And I think lastly, I said lastly already, but the headline trap can often get in the way of people's interest of entrepreneurship. They think they have to, be an Elon Musk in order to have some sense of success in this entrepreneurial journey. And that's just not true. We need to celebrate the side hustles. You can do so much more with less in our connected era, using these machines paired with the people in your community that allow you to do more. And so don't be afraid to start translating ideas into reality through action. And that's why I titled it this, because you don't need this book. You can learn entrepreneurship simply by doing and connecting with others. But if you want everything, in a friendly jolt, that's how this came together. And I'm really thankful for how just the synthesization that went into this. Every word matters. It's short, but it's dense. And I'm hoping it can make a good impact for folks who decide to pick one up.
Yeah, well, and you were leading me right into what I was going to, talk about, because I think that is right. I mean, we see the headlines, we celebrate the massive capital raises, and so and so just raised 100 million or 50 million, 20 million.
As we should.
Exactly.
That's
exactly
making news. That's remarkable stuff for sure.
Right. So, but for those that, I think there's that. We, as the quote, the startup mantra has grown, right? And like everybody you go out to California and everybody's got not a side hustle, but a startup, right? They're like, oh, I work here, but I've got a drone startup. I've got a AI startup. I've got, a robot startup. Everybody has a startup. And I think that there's that disconnect with, we attribute to sports the same way, right? The percentages of athletes that play in high school, that then go into college, that then go into the pros and everything. Doesn't mean that you can't play football and join rec league and and all that. You don't need the big headlines, and none of those people got to where they are without execution and moving down the road. And I've watched companies go through complete, 180, 360, pivots, and, not start all or not finish, where they started. right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you just don't know where it transitions. But to those people that, you know, have that fear, oh, you know, that's like a click over there, or I don't know people in that network, or that feel the intimidation or anything like that, what would be your words of advice for, you know, getting involved or overcoming those barriers to enriching inside the ecosystems?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was flipping to page 119 in You Don't Need This Book. It's the subsection of pivoting. The first sentence reads, "It's unlikely your initial plan is going to work."
Perfect.
And so, you know, whether it's a student starting out for the first time, or someone who's got a team and the roadmap just isn't clear, the ability to be flexible, the nimble nature of an early idea is kind of the leverage that you have. You're able to shift around. If you don't have any paying customers, you can change this idea until it's completely different. And so I think I might want you to rephrase the question, but real quick, getting over those barriers, I think there's a sense of risk that people need to reduce. Failure is just a pit stop towards where you want to be. So it's not, you know, if you put a bunch of time and money into it, that starts to create something a little different, but it doesn't hurt to tinker. You know, talk to some people, quickly start talking with people who would pay you. That's a big difference. We talk about customer discovery being the ultimate, you know, research. Steve's going to always tell me that my ideas are good, you know, but will he write me a check when I have it completed, or even before I do? That's something different. And so go outside of your existing sphere of influence in order to get the more raw data, which that's what you want to think of it as, feedback. You don't need to do everything one mentor tells you to do. It's just data. The more awareness you have around these data points, the better decision making you can have. And so I think the fear of failure, reducing that, being willing to tinker, exploring the community and learning from others. These are a couple of tactics that come to mind off the cuff. And I'll always wrap it with, like, find the energy of accelerating others. Don't worry so much about what you're building. Get more interested in what others are doing. And oftentimes that will translate into opportunities, the right path forward for whatever you're doing, or a connection that continues to evolve the idea. And spend the action. You have to work 80 hours so that you don't have to work 40 hours. There's a lot that goes into entrepreneurship. This is not the easy ticket. This is the hard work, but thankfully you have ownership. You have something called passion. You're probably building it because you care and you like to do it. And passion leads to persistence, which is my final chapter. Like, that's the wild card that I've that I've observed in going and having coffee with lots of entrepreneurs every week for 10 years, being an entrepreneur, exploring all these different ecosystems. It's the persistence stuff. And if you have enough passion, that can be the gear that gets you to that point. So find things you care about, ideation around areas that you are curious about, but then be realistic. Do you want to work in this, or should it remain a hobby? Is this a community you can sell to, right? I like drinking beer, so we built an electronic beer flight paddle, interacting with the market of craft beer, restaurants, breweries, and bars. That's very challenging. And so you recognize the realities of your situation. You don't want to try to boil the ocean when you can, you know, not even pour a glass of water yet. So I have a whole chapter on side hustles. I think that's a natural place for people to explore those ideas. I think it's important to stay balanced. Understand you don't want to dilute yourself to mediocrity. The example I give is, think of you as enough time to swing the axe 100 times. Do you want to hit 100 trees, or maybe a couple key trees a few more times? So being balanced with your personal bandwidth is pretty important when you are working a diverse career portfolio. Be transparent. If you're going to go into a new position, make sure that they are very familiar with your current activities, your excitement around those things, so that it doesn't create tension through secrecy. And there are some other things that come to mind. Be realistic. I've already mentioned that. And there's one more, but rephrase the question just to make sure I answered it. And maybe I did. I felt like there was a little workaround there.
Yeah, no, well, no, I mean, the fear, right? I mean, so people are, we always say get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because I mean, that's really what it takes. I mean, you have to push past. That's what we call growth. I mean, that is, unless if you're staying status quo and in your comfort zone, you're not growing, you're not expanding your horizons. And so I think that there's a lot of perception when someone's getting into entrepreneurship or starting a business or launching that side hustle or something is there's no such thing as new ideas, right? So it's just a new system, a process, a way, replacement of status quo or whatever, outside new elements being found or discoveries or whatever. It's really just revamping the way or how or what we do. So that's intimidating at times because, when you're just entering in, there is that fear, right? There's that fear of connecting in. There's that fear of, imposter syndrome. There's a number of things. So, breaking through that initial void is kind of what I was looking for of, how you get into it and how you launch and how you connect into the network that is ultimately what we've talked about all along, going to make you better. I mean, I would not be where I am doing things, without people like you, without, people here in the local community and across the country, extending their time, extending their resources, extending their advice to help me because they've been where I haven't yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I just echo all that. Patience was the other piece of that puzzle. I was listening to your guest last week, and he talked about courage. I think that was a good call out, knowing that you have to be willing to have a cold call. Talk to people you don't know, share your story, be vulnerable, get out and be beyond your comfort zone, all those things. Something that I thought about just as you were talking, Steve, was like, I wonder if it would be helpful to think about the fact that you don't really have any competitors. You might have people who are doing something similar, and you can lean on that in order to learn the ways towards a product market fit. But I think in the connected era, more like competitors are finding ways to be more collaborative than ever. Knowing that if you can build onto each other's success, it's that positive sum mindset. I think it's a difference between the scarcity and the abundance approach. And maybe that's a life thing, right? Versus always just about business. But if you can find like a groove, as I said earlier, no one can compete with you. So there's a lot of freedom, especially in the early days, like we talked about. You can do whatever you want. I mean, there's limitations, of course, to the different types of capital you may have access to. But there's something else that just real quick, that leads me to the 7 capitals. I first learned about it in the Startup Community Way, and Brad and Ian allowed me to use it in the entrepreneurial ecosystem section of my book. But it's a cool visual that helps us understand like what an average entrepreneurial ecosystem looks like. I'm wondering if we might play tech a little bit more. I know we're starting to come up on time, but let me see if I can share my screen because I've got another graphic that might be an interesting visual to add into this conversation. So I've allowed that, and hopefully you'll be able to weave that into the stream. How's that?
It's there. It's blurry, but we can.
Okay. So the outside knows we won't spend time on this. We can always look at it in the book, or we can talk about it more together anytime. Speaking of little Easter egg, my email is actually what you see under here. So replace the coffee with an @ symbol, and we can chat anytime you want. So the outside nodes, though, are very common, like mentors, co-working spaces, educational organizations, governments, chambers, networking events, the 1 Million Cups community, all the different nodes, the actors around the ecosystem. And those dotted lines are kind of the work of an ecosystem builder, where we're literally like the glue, wanting each other to know about what else is going on, and allowing that collaboration to further the center. That word that might be blurry is entrepreneur. And so if it doesn't support, accelerate, educate, do all the good things for that entrepreneur, this might be a misguided, perhaps even self-serving type of initiative. If it's focused on the entrepreneur, that organic kind of ethos, it will help evolve it from within. So you're not just building a co-working space and wondering why the entrepreneurs aren't showing up because you've checked a box to say you're innovative, but perhaps the people who actually need it are still over at the coffee shop having fun conversations. It might have been better off just to buy some coffee and get out of the way. So, those are some fun visualizations there. The center that I mentioned is one of the reasons why I brought that up. Steve, if you want to pull that down, that'd be fine. But it's the 7 capitals. So instead of always thinking about, we don't have enough money. Okay, you have a lake nearby. We have a wonderful education system. Everyone cares about each other. The human capital is high. The network capital, everyone's connected in one way or another. We have a beautiful cultural capital. There are other types of capital that you can lean into in order to attract what you want. And so I feel like that's a liberating framework that helps a lot of different economic development folks identify kind of the community and where they're really perhaps thriving, but also who's not at the table. Where can we be a little more inclusive and proactively build a more connected environment, and using the capitals that are in place to attract areas that you might not have as much of. So sorry, the word 7 capitals went into a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but it feels like there's a connection within that narrative.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a lot more than goes out into a company, into organizations, or into an ecosystem than money, capital, right? That's, I think, probably obviously the first word that people associate with capital. But you're right. I mean, the human capital. I mean, you can. Shows out there like Undercover Billionaire, that they've done a couple seasons of now, where it's here's $100, go build a business around it, and they have to do it with out the resources of having a bunch of money to throw at things, and that's where
watch those shows. The people who have done it before are usually successful at doing it again. So there's the nugget. Right. If you're a student watching this, simply by going through the process, you'll be better off.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to be ahead of the cubicle, prisoner who doesn't know how to move, even if they have a cool idea. That golden handcuffs create a mindset where they can't even tinker, explore. And so, of course, anyone should, lean into those side hustles and see what can happen. But if you're earlier in this kind of stage of life, I know this is through the college. What an upper hand, what an opportunity you have. I love younger entrepreneurs. The student entrepreneurial, the student mindset is so energizing. And so I'll tell you this, the only 2 things I ever regretted going through college was that I didn't start a business. I didn't start earlier. You don't need to wait for a piece of paper in order to start building around some ideas. And I also didn't understand the value of an engaged network. And so even if you feel like you don't have anything to offer, know that that's not true, and that you can go into a 1 Million Cups environment. You can hit up the startup drinks. You can go over into these business environment, these networking events, creating connections. And what you'll find is there's a community hug that occurs around folks who haven't gone down this path yet. And so oftentimes being students or lifetime learners, are really welcomed with open arms. And I think you'll find that energizing. And even if it's not right now, you'll start connecting those dots to create the path for whatever you need to do moving forward.
Yeah, well, and that ties back into that fear, right? And that how do you start or whatever? And I think there's lies the key. You mentioned not needing the piece of paper, to start the business while you're in college or whatever. But we don't need permission to lead. We don't have to go get a permission slip to go out and lead, to connect, to go to an organization. I
haven't heard that since elementary, like being
right.
able to
but so often. Yeah. Well, but so often we're waiting for that, fictitious thing of, somebody will invite me to the thing that I need to get to, and that's what's going to launch me. Or, watching other people and they had that, and that. Well, we don't need permission to go and seek that, to go and grab that. Right. Yeah. But it comes from our, upbringing and, authority and all that of, having to have permission to do certain things. But when you're in entrepreneurship, when you're in business, when you're in, even just, working in an organization, that's one of the things that is key, is that you don't have to have permission to go out and step up and be leader, be, an advocate for something, go out and, connect to a network or whatever. We don't have to have permission.
Yeah. It definitely takes initiative. And so pushing forward with that mindset that you just talked about, and being transparently vulnerable, right? And being truly interested in the success of others. If you don't have an ulterior motive, I've found you can get to much more interesting conversations faster, and it creates a relationship. And if business emerges from that exchange over time, then it's going to be a much more natural relationship. Your guest talking about sales last week, was really spot on with that wisdom being shared. And I think it takes time to learn that. When you've got something exciting, when you need to make money, when you're doing something and you haven't perhaps built an engaged network, it's natural to feel a little more salesy, a little more one-way street. But I had a person one time earlier in my career say, it always feels like a one-way street with you. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to change that. And ever since, I've really tried to maybe talk a little less, be a little bit more concise, be more interested in what you're up to, and almost keeping what I'm up to as a secret. Making it a game or a hobby of meeting other people and seeing and almost stepping away to appreciate the interaction that's occurring gives you kind of another layer, a psychological leverage on how that relationship is forming, and leaning into the things that are working while leaving the things that might not behind. So that's once again a wonderful conversation here, Steve. Thank you for the opportunity of just exploring the realm of thought. Real quick, to land the other plane that we were talking about, knowing that education is a part of this conversation. I've been asking people, what can you learn in school? And this might translate to a hard question for you, so be ready. And I hope you got a good on your feet thought here. But what can you learn in school? What can you do? What can you experience in school that you can't learn from the internet or from personal interactions?
Yeah, well, it's the soft skills, right? The socialization, the metrics of you mentioned cold calling earlier, right? So somebody can read to me, give me a script and do all that, but until you actually punch through and taken that time to go through and make it actually happen, right? Get on your first cold calls, because you can sit side by side. I know when we train salespeople and everything, so we do, right? You sit them down with somebody, and then they kind of watch and shadow. Then they kind of do it, with training wheels, if you will. And then the first time that they do it is that's the hurdle, the hump to get over. I can tell you from so I've got 5 kids. My oldest is a Girl Scout. And one of the things that we make her do is when she goes and sells Girl Scout cookies, so this year was a little bit different, over COVID and everything, I made her FaceTime the people that she was asking. I could go and ask the people, myself, hey, my daughter's selling Girl Scout cookies, you want to buy? But that doesn't teach her.
That's not the point.
Right. And so I think those are those skills that we can't learn in school. The socialization, the stuff that you have to go through. I mean, there's a plethora of entrepreneurial lessons that, the street smarts, right, that you just have to get out there and do and experience. And, that's one thing that I've learned through talking to some amazing entrepreneurs in our ecosystem here, is I know Alex Frohmeyer, Beam Dental, he said the first time I'm doing something is the first time that I'm doing it. Right. So like, the first time that he went out and raised $20 million, he had never done that before. And so I think that's where, we look at it like, oh my gosh, you did that. Like, that's incredible. That's crazy. How did you do it? He's like, I don't, I learned from others. And then I went out and just, went through the motions and the steps. And it's each one of those little lily pads that you hop across gets you to the bank of raising the 20 million or whatever. So I think that's what we forget is that, it does take execution. Action equals traction, and you need to get out there and do.
Yeah, that micro learning, and also the space to just explore with less risk. I think those safe spaces and allowing the entrepreneurial spirit to explore passion and learn through the perspective of the educational curriculum, but also the experiential stuff that goes so far. That seems to be the continued kind of narrative of folks who have been answering that question for me. And I just went through that myself. I mean, not to wrap things up, but I mean, I had never written a book before, but it was something that I knew needed to happen. And it was like navigating through the fog. And I'm very at peace with how this thing has emerged. I haven't paid much attention to these, so maybe we can close off with answering any questions or following up on any of the comments. But navigating that fog and having this thing completed feels great. But I also quickly get interested in helping Steve translate those ideas into his first book, or whoever it might be. Like I think I'm just naturally interested in how does this hit you? Like the feedback from readers has been so fun to talk about, and then also almost everyone wants to write a book if they haven't already, and so I can help work through that process with you. We built Pour Over Publishing. Maybe it's a boutique of authors someday, right? So there's also.
So I was going to say, but that's the beauty of that connected ecosystem stuff, right? So like now I don't have to go build a publishing company or all the mistakes or lessons or whatever that you learned along the way, I get to benefit from. So yes, do a book tour to get. So I've got the title. I've said it for years and I've never done it. So and it's blunt, but there's a purpose behind it. So it's called "People Are Stupid, People Are Lazy. Let Me Explain." So and it's
I've heard that before, so that's confirmed.
Yeah, well, it's
it existed before, indeed. Yes,
right.
And my title never changed either. It was always, "You don't need this book." Now the developmental editor suggested I change it. I was like, no, like that's not happening. But the subtitle was a nice addition: "Entrepreneurship in the Connected Era," so that it's not just some random who knows why this book is in the business section of the nonfiction area. So that was wise. Working through the book writing process, that's a whole another conversation that I'd be happy to talk about if you want. But it was flying while you're building the plane. Fortunately, I've been flying these planes of entrepreneurship my whole life. So it was more about, do I want to trade time for money, and knowing I'll take the time. I have the capabilities of doing all this. We'll spend a little more time, a little less money, and end up with something that feels great. It's pro grade. Find a typo in this book. I'll buy you a bottle of scotch, right? So it's something I'm really proud of. And when it becomes so personal, it's not about the lack of options. It's the overwhelming amount of options. It becomes paralyzing. You don't want to make the wrong move. And I was fortunate to only make I don't know if any missteps, but there were a couple ways. I think the biggest thing was just the delay. I couldn't make a decision. And then you make it, you move forward, and it turns out to be just fine. So I'm really excited about it. Steve, if some of the viewers that might have enjoyed our conversation want to pick up a book, I'd love to. BenMcDougal.com has a page where you can direct order the book. I'll sign it. I'll sign your copy and send it your way through the publisher. But it's also a chance to maybe let me buy you a coffee. Use the key phrase, the coupon code 1MC. It'll take $5 off real quick and allow you to get this little thing that means a lot to me. But I've heard that maybe you do need this book as a joke on the title. I'd love to hear what you think, and a little friendly offer there for some of the folks who have tuned in today.
Yeah, appreciate that. We'll put that in the comments there.
Have there been any questions? Like I said, I've kind of not been able to focus on some of the rolling posts that you've shared. Anything else we should speak about before closing things down?
Yeah, no, we've had comments. So just a lot of reiterating, what's been said, I think is resonating, so that's, those nuggets, right. Of the wisdom that, some of it's yours, some of it's, through the years and the conversations with other entrepreneurs that just becomes part of our own, mantra and dialect. So, yeah.
Oh my God, 19 comments. Fun. Well, hi, everyone. I should have been paying a little more attention. Thanks for spending lunch with us here today. As I've mentioned a few times, I'd love to connect. I'd love to learn what you're spending your time on, what you're building, and perhaps there are ways that I could connect a few dots, keep you building in those directions that you care about. I'm pretty active throughout the social media landscape. And so benmcdougal.com is a quick way of landing into LinkedIn or Twitter or BitCloud if you are into that. I'm pretty active throughout the social grid and would love to just continue the conversation. So Steve, thank you first and foremost for your work, for hosting these conversations, for our relationship through 1 Million Cups. It's enriched my life. I've visited Columbus. I love Ohio. I was born in Springfield, Ohio. So there's all sorts of funny and cool reasons why we've been able to interact. But our times at 1MCOS and all the people, George and Mark and SJ and all the folks that I think of in that family of the Columbus and also Ohio and Midwest wide. It's just a real treat to interact with so many remarkable people. So thank you.
Yeah, well, hey, likewise. I know there's a lot of things that I say and everything that directly or subtly, subconsciously have come through interactions and discussions and late night chats, on Friday nights after a couple bourbons and whatnot. So, always a pleasure. Appreciate it. Thanks for being part of this. And for those that enjoyed it, make sure you connect with Ben. Very easy guy to reach out to. A plethora of information, and he's got a great book that literally summarizes kind of that entrepreneurial journey. And so it's a great resource to have. You don't need it, but you should get it, right? So, but anyways, yeah, we'll be back here next Friday on Fireside Chat. And if anybody wants to join us or knows a speaker or anything that we should chat with, we're open. I mean, this is just a fun way to hang out, have discussions. No set agenda. We just literally get on and have a fireside chat. So we appreciate it. Thanks to the Delaware Entrepreneurial Center at Ohio Wesleyan University. And we will catch you next week. Take care, everybody.